Find Cody Willard and Gerald Celente on Spotify and on the Spotify apps.
Well, who knew, boo? Oh, we get a clue, yo. Do-wop blew your mind from QU to Soho. Cody Willow, New Mexico, Lobo, Muddy Souls. Get around like
Hello, welcome back to Cody Underground. I am Cody Willard, and today I have a very special guest, Gerald Celente, the man, the legend himself. Gerald, thanks for joining me again.
Thanks for having me on with one of my favorite hosts. We go with. No, I mean that. We had some great times together back in the days, and still do.
From the producers on down, rarely did everybody in the room agree on the guests, but Gerald Celente was always. Everyone was very excited when you'd come on because we did. We had great times with you, and your stuff is so compelling. You know, the stuff we'll talk about today is very related to the stuff we used to talk about on the show.
It is.
And I will say, I watched your videos. I paid $49 for the premium videos that you put up with us on Spotify. And you can buy with Spotify credits. And everybody check out Spotify if you haven't yet. Gerald's on there with his articles. And my first question talks about some of the stuff I saw in those videos, which is the grand manipulation and this time of manipulation in the markets that we live through today. Can you introduce us a little bit more to that concept, and then I'll give you a follow-up question?
Sure, and that's the conference that we just had, by the way, over here in Colonial Kingston, New York, and that building where it was shot from, that's a 1774 building. It was called the Academy, and that's where people like John the Vanderlyn, the famous Hudson River painter, went to school, Governor DeWitt Clinton. You know, so it's a really historic corner. It's the most historic corner in the United States, the only place where there were pre-Revolutionary War stone buildings on each corner. So that's where that was shot from, and we restored the building from it, you know, really bringing it back to life. And we have 3 of the 4 corners. So we had our conference where we launched, and it's a 5.5-hour, as you know, conference where we launched the top trends of 2015. And the top one is grand manipulation. And by the way, that's being written by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. We came up with the trend, talked to him about it, and he's totally on board with it. The game is rigged, and we point out how it's rigged. And I'm sure that everyone that listens to you and follows you knows how it's rigged. We're not making it up when we say the Forex, the currency exchange, is rigged. We know it's a fact. They caught the people and they gave them little fines. And what are they talking about? Only rigging, what, 5.3 trillion a day? It's all right. Let it go by. But don't get caught speeding. Make sure your signal light's on. You know, don't make any mistakes, because then they'll really get you. But rig a $5.3 trillion market. You know what we'll do? We'll call it a misdeed. Huh? How's that? And then you look at the LIBOR market. What's that? Well, that's only the interest rates that we're all paying. Oh, they're rigging that one too? Yeah, they rigged that one too. How much? Well, the best number they could come up with was around 700 trillion. It's rigged. You look at the gold markets. Rigged? Dr. Paul Craig Roberts spells it out in detail. Hey, why is physical demand for gold going up and silver when it's going down on the commodities markets? Couldn't be because they're dumping tons of short selling at a time when nobody's buying in wee hours of the morning. No, that has nothing to do with it.
Well, and they're using paper, too. I mean, this is paper promises and ETF paper promises and certificates of gold and silver that very unlikely the gold and silver that those are promised, that those certificates are supposedly representing are no longer there in the quantity that those certificates represent.
Of course not. This is just made up stuff.
So why? This is a growing trend, the manipulation of the markets. And how is that possible? Everybody talks about that, well, when a crisis comes, maybe we can finally fix things. Here we are 6 years after that 2008 crisis, and nothing has been fixed, and probably it's more manipulated, and the scale of these manipulations are bigger than ever.
Because that goes into one of our other trends, bankism. It's not capitalism. Let's grow up about this. the banks are in control. Don't believe me? How about 4 words that killed it? Too big to fail. Oh, those too big to fails, where they get 40% bigger? And who's the guy that helped deregulate the Glass-Steagall Act that allowed the banks to become casinos that gamble? They call it investment banks. Call it a gambling. No, we got to be proper. Who's the guy that did it? Robert Rubin. Where was he from? Oh, wasn't he the CEO of Goldman Sachs? And after they deregulated it, didn't he get a job with Citigroup that just used to be Citibank, but it was merged to become with Smith Barney and Travelers? Didn't he make like $150 million after leaving government? Yeah, but he's brilliant. I think he went to Harvard or Yale or Princeton. He's brilliant. How about a payoff? Why, how dare you? No, he's Robert Rubin. And who's the other guy that gave us too big to fail under Bush? Wasn't it Henry Paulson? Wasn't he with Goldman Sachs too? Why, Gerald Celente, are you saying that just because they came from the Goldman Sachs gang and then under the guy that, what is he now playing? Frankenstein movies, Paulson, I think that's his latest job. What is it, you mean just because he bailed out AIG and Goldman Sachs had a $13 billion bad bet with them and came up with the words too big to fail under the great lie when he hit the news, when he said we were going to do this, that it was going to save the average person in the real estate market that got shafted? Or maybe through Dick Cheney, they got anally fed. Yeah, that's the way they torture them in the banks.
So, but Gerald, why does it go on? At what point?
Why does it go on? Because
at what point do people get some control back and the
because
swings back?
It goes on because it's not that the banks have influence. The banks are the government. Can't people get that in their head? I'm just here. Cody. Let's go to Europe. Who's the guy running? Who's the president of the European Central Bank?
Draghi.
Where was he? Who was he with?
Deutsch, I believe.
No, he was a general. He was running the European division of Goldman Sachs.
Oh, shit.
Who's the guy running? Who's running the Bank of England? Carney. Where was Carney? Goldman Sachs. How much more? I'm not making this stuff up. It's the banks are in control of the government. You know what they like to call this stuff? They call it campaign contributions. Could any adult call it bribes and payoffs?
Let's call a duck a duck. If it, the old saying, if it quacks and swims like one. So you used something a minute ago. The banks are the government, and the classic example of that is when you see these banks get all those bailouts and continued wild, trillion-dollar subsidies going on right now with 0% interest rates, and the Federal Reserve buying, and the central banks around the world buying these probably worthless real estate assets and securities from the banks in the form of quantitative easing and whatnot. And then we give them those fines, and they'll be record fines of $20 or $30 billion, but wasn't it our own money anyway? We just bailed those banks out. So it gets to be this Peter pays Paul kind of thing.
Yes, and not only that, they'll use the fines as their tax write-offs.
Right, exactly. So they get the 40% off the fine anyway, top off.
And then look what happened with the new budget that was just passed. What they have in there now the derivatives are like, they're like deposit insurance. So they made bad bets. We got to pay off their bad bets.
I mean, it's tails you win, heads I lose, classic mentality. So you also you used the term capitalist a moment ago, and the lack thereof perhaps in our country, the lack of capitalism. And if you look at the spectrum, say, at communism to socialism to capitalism to outright anarchism, where are we in the U.S. today? Are we anywhere somewhere in the capitalist realm over there?
No, it's fascism. It's called a merger of state and corporate powers. That's by definition, according to Mussolini, who knew a thing or two about it.
And is that then a form of socialism?
No, it's fascism. It's fascism in the sense that socialism is they give you back. Here they give you back, they pretend to give you back. But this is where it's slavelandia. It's a multinational takeover. That's another one of our trends, takeover. Look at this Trans-Pacific Partnership. How's that for a whitewashed word? There's enough trade deals already. This isn't about a trade deal or the one with the Transatlantic Partnership. These aren't trade deals. What they're doing is they're making laws where the multinationals make the laws, and they're sovereign to sovereign states. They overrule countries. That's a fact. And the other fact is that in this, you know why they attacked us on 9/11? Yeah, because they hate our freedom and democracy. That's what they told us. Well, we don't have to worry about that anymore because we're not allowed to look at the bill. That's right. You're not allowed to look at the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We're going to fast-track this through. And guess what, Cody? Congress isn't allowed to look at it either. But I'll tell you who's allowed to look at it. About 500 people.
And the attorneys who write it for the corporations.
You know it.
Global corporations.
You got it.
You know, this speaks to not only are the laws being written and put in place that benefit those giant trans-global corporations, the tax code itself is so swayed where, like we're talking about, the banks get trillion-dollar subsidies every year, and maybe they pay some taxes, but they get much more back from the government than they'll ever pay in taxes over the last 5 years and probably over the next 5 years. How bad does this disconnect between the wealthy and the poor have to get, and the extreme wealth that we see versus the millions that are in poverty in our own country, in the United States, in the inner cities, in rural America, everywhere, versus, I mean, is it all government policy and government taxation? Is there anything that we can do as citizenry that sort of that helps and create some prosperity and change that trend?
It's only going to change if we do it. Look at this last election. 74% of the people decided to stay home rather than vote for a lesser of two evil. I mean, that's astounding. If they had an election in Russia right now and only 34% of the people, 36% of the people turned out, it'd be front page news. Look at the new study that just came out from the Pew Research Institute. They just showed that the gap between the rich and the poor has gotten even wider.
And that's my point. I mean, this is
it's going to be up to the
trend.
It's up to the individuals, and it's taking place in other countries where the men are men and the women are women, and they're speaking up and taking a stand, rather than in this country where most of the people defend the freaks that they believe in, and my freak is better than your freak, and so I'm serious. I mean, you look at what's going on in Spain. The Podemos party came out of nowhere in a year, and now they're 33%. You look what's going on in Italy between Beppe Grillo's party and the Northern League. Look what's going on in England with UKIP. Look at they just forced an election in Sweden. They want because the people are saying enough. You know, Cody, one of the ways I made my name as a trend forecaster was with my book Trend Tracking back in the late 1980s. It was a Warner book. And in that book, I forecast that there'd be a new third party. And I mentioned someone like Ross Perot as the type of person that the people were looking for. And, of course, in 1992 it happened. The time has never been ready, as I see it, more so than now, for a new third party.
Well, and why does it have to be a party? That's always been my thing. I'm very anti-party, not just two parties.